and subscribe, and my stories will thrive. Welcome to another video by the Blue Tongues of Hell for some more Hilda Chronicles. The second chapter is called Blade of Gold. Far away from Ainu folklore and the long-gone social disdain, Kyoko did not perish in the terrific carrion clouds. The sudden baneful hurricane that had stolen her away from her sorry town did not crack her skull on the nearby Nori Black rocks or drown her in the cuttlefish ink depths of an angry ocean. She somehow survived the hellish winds and was carried further than anyone from her village or island had ever travelled. Kyoko dreamed of her mother, trapped in clouds of ash, reaching out to her with elongated bony fingers, whispering bittersweet words in an unfamiliar tone. When Kyoko pulled her hand away, lightning snapped and forked the grey skies. And when her mother's impersonator frowned, Kyoko was softly dropped into unknown northern waters, where her final tears of torment were lost in a frosty mist. The deadly sea should have killed her in less than an hour. Instead, Kyoko's body bobbed like the driftwood in the rolling seawater for days without succumbing to the blood-freezing cold. There was a bubble of frizzling electricity around her motionless body, possibly keeping her warm. Was it an aftermath of the supernatural storm, or just a school of bioluminescent jellyfish hitching a ride? After the fourth day, playing dead to slow her body down was not working anymore. She was so hungry and dehydrated that her grasp on reality was slipping through her brittle white fingers. Seabirds swirled above her, making the most disturbing cries, far too low and distorted for terns or gannets. Fighting to raise her eyelids, Kyoko saw peach-colored meat floating beside her, to her left. A fresh slab of salmon flesh. Still floating on her back, Kyoko languidly stretched her neck towards the shimmering meat and sank her teeth into the soft skin. She felt a pang as red liquid splattered her cheeks and spiraled out of her pale flesh into the sea, forming a scarlet tree with delicate boughs and branches. Digging in deeper and tearing out a morsel, her teeth scraped against something tough that sent ripples of pain up her arm. Kyoko tugged at the piece of flesh still dangling from her left arm, and swallowed it. The intense cold suddenly began to spread throughout her body, and with a cry of agony, she came to her senses, thrashing about in the Red Sea. Only feet away, there were grey polished rocks poking out of the water. One of the smooth boulders slumped over to one side and revealed a limp fin. "Rapunkamwi," exclaimed Kyoko, thinking the rubbery rock was a divine orca sent to save her. The whale was in fact a dogfish shark with an arched, spiny back, and fortunately it was as dead as a herring, like the few other ones floating around her. Kyoko's disappointment was traded for throbbing pain in her arm that was causing her mind to spin deliriously. She pushed one of the sharks away, leaving a bloody handprint on its clammy gills, and began to panic. Soon her blood would attract bigger predators. On the horizon, a golden sun was bleeding slivers of light across the waves and into the heavy ashen clouds. A dark silhouette slithered out of the sea in front of the rising sun, and Kyoko choked on a mouthful of sea water. She saw a glimmering sea dragon, growing bigger as every wave splashed her face. The snake-like creature made a horrendous screech and plunged underwater. Fiery eyes resurfaced like those of Akuma and drifted about as will-o'-the-wisps would in a poisonous bog. Struggling to keep afloat, Kyoko thought she saw a woman caught in the beast's jaws. The victim was calling for help, reaching out to her with broken arms. Kyoko remembered Hayashi's mangled, pathetic face, and that was all she could take. She let herself drown. Through a faint mustard mist, a crew of fishermen spotted a beacon out at sea. They were at first reluctant to be lured into another monstrous trap, and then eventually fought their justified fears and sailed towards the mysterious boy. Perchance they would return triumphant to their lost kingdom of Vanaheim. In pitch darkness, a rough, knotted hand clasped Kyoko's sinking body. "What do you want from me?" asked Kyoko, letting the salty water poison her lungs. The great dragon's eyes opened all at once, like dazzling himawari sunflowers. Kyoko went into spasms, frothing bile and surf from the mouth as she was dragged along the barnacled neck of the eely dragon. She dangled before its head, upside down, dripping blood into the sea below. "Run!" someone cried. Kyoko was violently hoisted up and swung onto what she thought was a flat tongue beyond colourful round teeth. Kyoko felt buckets of fish writhe and squirm around her as she slid down into the belly of the beast.
Praise Goddess Ran!
Shouted a group of tall men, proud of the impressive haul of fish in their nets. As the nets were unravelled and the slippery contents spilled over the Drakar's deck, one Norseman cried out in shock when Kyoko's lifeless body slid amongst the agitated fish.
Such a strange catch.
A surreal young woman appeared with eyes like raven beaks and coal black hair down to her thighs, covered by a torn floral fabric.
A seal maiden? She must be.
The mesmerized expedition leader fought off the other curious men, wrapped her up in bearskin, and carried the Selkie to his tent.
Ran, have you sent us one of your 9 daughters? Bloodugada, is this you with your bloody hair? A seal, perhaps? But if a Selkie you are, then we are to be wed.
The enchanted chief examined the shivering seal skin while removing the colourful yukata fabric. At that moment, Kyoko opened her eyes and screamed in terror. She scratched at his cheeks and chest, spitting insults as she pressed her back against the tent's curved canvas. Asmund grunted, and instead of slapping a palm over her mouth and teaching her better manners, he tried to reassure her with a nod to food and water just beside the bed of straw. Just then, Pal ripped the flaps open and cried,
Another tornado!
Asmund closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Instead of grabbing the annoying cook's windpipe and shoving his face into a bowl of piss that was supposed to be soup, he stuck his head out of the worn tent. There really was a storm dangerously approaching, whisking up increasingly bigger waves. Asmund left Kyoko alone and rushed out to bark orders at his weary men.
Raise the oars!
Yelled Asmund to his crew, frantically attempting to row away from the peril.
I said raise them!
He bellowed, cracking one man's helmet with his sword's hilt. As the sailor slumped to the floor and the rowing ceased, the tornado thankfully lost its momentum and deflated, sending faint swirls of mist into the eyes of all the relieved Norsemen.
When Odin roars, raise the oars, you bunch of numbskulls. When Odin roars, raise the oars, you bunch of numbskulls.
This fruitless eastern voyage was on its last legs. No glory or redemption awaited them in the land of Odin, and yet everyone wanted to sail back home including Asmund, although he couldn't admit it out loud. He sensed a brewing animosity aboard. Ever since they set foot in the tundra wastelands a few weeks earlier, morale had taken a hit. The Norsemen had dealt with wild folk living there. In so many ways he sought to forget that the expedition had lost its purpose. His mind was beginning to play tricks on him. What was the point of murdering farmers if there was nothing to gain but more bloodshed and sorrow? He was starving, depressed, and ready to tear anyone's head off. But Asmund remained stolid, like his father, and led his men without denting too many egos or faces, within reason. Asmund cleared his throat and gave his tent a suspicious look. Before the mermaid arrived, a vicious storm nearly sunk their weather-beaten ship, and Asmund couldn't deny that when they fished her out, another one had immediately showed its dazzling teeth. He clasped his sword, convinced he had truly cursed his crew by inviting this seal maiden to stay. Asmund started when the ship's copper-haired navigator tapped his shoulder repetitively, asking for more hell's brew from their last raid, and if it wouldn't be wise to set sail west, adding with a lewd wink if he couldn't warm the mermaid up a bit while he made his mind up. Asmund let his sword drop into its scabbard and pushed Odger aside with powerful authority.
Stop your pissing and moaning, Odger. We all turned into animals.
Odger shrugged and replied,
Have her to yourself, then. Let me just point out that we should avoid the ice while we still have our crown jewels. The white dragon will be onto us before you can pull your trousers up.
Odger joined the oarsmen to sulk and moan, while Pal gutted a monkfish to fry. Asmund mumbled something about how low the green elk's honor had fallen.
What are we even doing here?
Later that day, when the sea was a peaceful mirror, Asmund used a deep and calm voice to reassure the young woman, as well as himself, that all was going to end well.
Welcome aboard the Blade of Gold, maiden of the sea.
Kyoko listlessly stared back, shivering. Her forehead was a furnace. When the huge man's lips stopped moving, she thought she could still hear his voice, and she thought she could understand what he was thinking. Asmund spoke aloud.
My crew and I will do all.
He paused, almost out of habit, to find the next words to end another tedious sentence, and then spat out the rest.
All that is in our power to keep you safe until we arrive back home. One fortunate day in the future.
He saw the blank expression on her face and placed dry clothes beside her, hoping she would understand he meant no harm.
Please help yourself to anything you need. Blodukata.
The only real sense she could make out of Asmund's gibberish was from the way this strange bearded man looked at her. His unusual blue eyes exhumed warmth, kindness, and a touch of feral mystery. He doesn't appear to be another Akuma, she concluded, and accepted the outlandish male clothing that had a strong scent of burnt leaves for some reason.
Who are you?
Requested Asmund, not really expecting an answer from this frail and frightened prisoner who only spoke in a musical tongue of nonsense.
What are you?
He thought, when Asmund knelt closer to his captive. Kyoko glared back at him and began to tremble even more. A large wave brought the ship down with a thud, tossing Asmund onto the young woman. His cheek pressed against her wet yukata, but before Kyoko could deliver a crushing kick between his legs, Asmund pushed himself away, noticing a gaping flesh wound on her left arm. Dropping a firm hand on her right shoulder, Asmund said,
Do not worry. I will take care of you.
He took a strip of fabric from his undercoat and delicately bound it round her wounded arm. From inside his coat, he produced a brown flask and emptied some of its contents onto the improvised bandage.
Mead and Hellsbrew will do for now. We have other ways back home, if this doesn't do the trick.
He said, letting a few last honey drops pour from the flask down his throat. Kyoko flinched mildly as the alcohol burned her torn flesh. The sea became calmer again, and Kyoko fell asleep beside Asmund. He stroked her silky hair and dreamt of the kingdom he hadn't seen for so many moons. Kyoko had been having a feverish nightmare where a tall, muscular man held a golden blade over his head, threatening to split her body in two. The man wielded the blade with such ease that it became almost fascinating to watch, while also being utterly terrifying. Now awake, she was dry and dressed in Asmund's warmer clothing. Ashamed by what must have happened, she checked to see if another Hayashi devil hadn't taken advantage of her while she slept. Apparently not all men were swines from hell. She drank rainwater from a jug next to her bed and found some nuts and dried fish. Why such kindness from such odd strangers? I must be dead. Asmund was calmer than usual, almost forthcoming, and the reason why was a mystery to no one. He gazed upon the northern auroras, and their willowy trails of colourful light reminded him of Kyoko's cascades of tar. Then it struck him like a thunderbolt. They had finally found what they were looking for. Asmund strode along the portside gunwale and clanged the decorated shields with the antler hilt of his heavy sword. He ignored the groans and the swearing and made an announcement.
I'll make this short,
he said, winking to Odger, who was still too drunk to take offense.
Stand by to tack. We're going home.
The journey back to the land of the Norsemen was a long and daunting prospect, but everyone cheered nonetheless. During the last year, they had conquered a couple of uncharted lands, scouted for treasures to arouse the king's interest, but they hadn't found much to bring back. On the upside, the mermaid was proof of unknown Far East pastures to invade, and that was worth its weight in gold. Perhaps the rough voyage had not been such a failure after all. A few weeks passed. The blade of gold began to glow in the morning sun, and truly looked like the legendary sword Gram it was named after, slicing through the amber silk waters with a gentle breeze pushing the tattered sail. The longship gently rocked in silence, while all but Asmund slept. He watched his mermaid slumber, unaware she was listening while he sang under his breath. Your delicate feet on this bed of straw remind me of streams where the clay is sought. You clearly were born from an ethereal mold. Your soup of seaweed whispers secrets gods have told. Your dark lashes turn of worlds in ashen. Shouted Asmund, waking everyone up with a start. Something in the water was building up a current around the ship. It's back, he cried. The crew quickly snapped out of their ill temper, grabbed weapons and shields, and peered overboard. There was a slithering shadow beneath the waves, coiling its huge body in circles around the ship. A few months ago, the same creature had attacked them off a volcanic island further west. One of Asmund's childhood friends was snatched by the beast and dragged underwater, never to be seen again.
Back for more, you slimy slug,
Asmund said.
Let's get a taste of your blood this time.
Asmund unsheathed the sword, and every man aboard followed his lead, banging their own against the hull where their shields had been hanging.
Wait do not fear you.
Kyoko thought she heard Asmund call out the name Trolls. She sensed his grief and dread, but he showed no weakness, still banging his blade on a black cross shield. From behind them, a heavy green tail slithered over the deck and slapped Asmund overboard. His double-edged sword clattered down the wooden floor, and Asmund splashed into the blade sharp cold. Ulf, who was second in command, did not waver and ordered the archers to be ready to shoot.
Feed it well, sons of Aegir and Ran. Light your arrows, and aim for the eyes and the neck.
The enormous serpent rose from the sea, facing the startled crew, with milk and fangs the size of their own arms.
Fire!
Cried Ulf, terror-stricken. The first flurry of fiery arrows dug into the back of the Jormungandr's throat, causing it to spit poison into the air. Kyoko slid through the line of archers, lighting their second arrows, and leaned over the gunner. She couldn't see Asmund, but Kyoko was certain he was alive, desperately holding on to his last breath of air. She didn't beat about the bush and climbed over the edge.
You fool! What are you doing?
Said Ulf, while swaying his sword at the angry serpent. Kyoko bravely dived into the sea. The archers hit the Jormungandr's neck multiple times with their powerful Elmwood arrows. It wailed and lashed out, ripping through the ship's sail and snapping Ulf's head and torso off like a bite from an apple. His lower half danced an uncoordinated jig for a few gruesome moments, then keeled over, splattering Odger's boots in the runny stools, oozing from Ulf's severed guts. Below the vermilion red waves and around the bloody snake, Kyoko swam like a porpoise to find the man who'd cared and looked after her. There he was, near the ship's keel, just about to drown. Kyoko grabbed his hair and pressed her purple lips against his. When she blew her air into his lungs, Asmund looked like the Jormungandr had taken a bite out of his spine. The moment lasted a lifetime, until the underwater current from the thrashing tail of the wounded serpent pushed them up to the surface. The Jormungandr screeched at the sailors and spat out a cloud of poison at them as it fled into the depths. Asmund protected Kyoko's face and received a splash of acid all over the right side of his head and arm. The seawater helped relieve the pain and subdue the burning, but Asmund would remain severely disfigured. While the men hauled their captain back onto the blade of gold, Kyoko peeled off some black seaweed from the Drakar's hull. Later, She would grind the seaweed with saliva into a dark paste and apply it to Asmund's wounds. First things first, everyone chipped in to repair the longship. The sail was sewn back together with walrus-hide threads. The halyard rope was mended with horsehair string. A caulking compound was being prepared with tar and tallow, while others stuffed seams with oakum around damaged buttocks, using leftover fibres from torn ropes. The hull would hold up long enough for them to find a safe haven ashore, where the carpenters would have to make proper repairs. Afterwards, the deck was scrubbed clean, and finally Ulf's remains were prepared for his last voyage to Valhalla. That evening, an improvised raft sailed him out to sea. His corpse could be seen burning throughout the night, surrounded by countless stars, mapping out the route to eternal rest for a fearless warrior. Asmund sniffed the salty breeze and smiled, and so did the others. Kyoko didn't think much of her culinary talent, but she had made a habit out of fixing dishes for the ship crew. Pearl pretended to be vexed, while secretly relishing her delicate seaweed fish soups. Her peculiar meals gave the gloomy lot an unexpected moral boost, and they all began to engage in uplifting conversations about poor Ulf and Thrall's accomplishments on the battlefield. The many tucks and brighter expressions gradually made Kyoko feel more at home on this infernal trip.
Your strawberry lips emblaze the ship,
thought Asmund, watching his nurse tending his wounds. As Kyoko smiled back, he was caught off guard and reacted awkwardly, snatching her wrist and preventing her from continuing her task.
No need for vanity at the land of the brave woman.
Kyoko, she replied, tapping her chest with the other hand. Asmund admitted defeat, let go of her wrist, and took another puff on his pipe. Kyoko continued to treat his scars with her sticky ointment. On the horizon, the funeral bonfire gave one last gasp of life, sending a whirlwind of embers to the heavens, and then the raft was cloaked in darkness. See you soon for the next chapter of the Hilda Chronicle.